There are lessons that people spend entire lifetimes trying to understand, yet in just a few minutes, you can witness them unfold through vivid, living stories. There are souls who have walked, who once spread terror across the forests of Savatthi, suddenly stopping before a serene figure and hearing a single sentence that transforms his entire inner world. Or a simple village girl offering a bowl of milk to a frail monk, unaware that this small, pure act would open a path to great enlightenment for all humanity. There are people in power and wealth, capable of buying entire kingdoms. Yet they realize that true strength does not lie in thrones, but in the ability to bow to the truth. There are hearts overwhelmed with suffering, losing what they cherish most, thinking they will collapse. But precisely through their pain they are taught wisdom, gaining a new understanding of life and impermanence. And there are souls living in luxury, in desire and beauty, thinking that this is everything. Yet when faced with the gaze and teachings of the awakened one, they recognize the way back to the light, where beauty and desire no longer bind them, but become a springboard for goodness and profound transformation. These stories are not distant legends. They are living proof that enlightenment is real, that the human mind can transform from violence to compassion, from desire to wisdom, from suffering to serenity. Within the first 30 seconds, you will feel the power of this message. Every experience, every action, whether small or extreme, can become a path to enlightenment. Step into the world of these 5 stories, where every word, every glance, every action carries the power to transform. You will see that enlightenment is not something far away. It exists in every heartbeat, every step, and even in the seemingly ordinary moments of life. This journey will take you from astonishment and admiration to a deep realization that enlightenment is not merely theoretical. It is alive and truly accessible within every human being. You will witness extraordinary transformations from the darkest shadows of the soul, from despair that seems insurmountable to the light of peace, profound understanding, and compassion emerging in each person. Most importantly, you will realize that enlightenment is not reserved for saints alone. It is a potential inherent within you, within your daily actions and choices. In just a few minutes, you will journey through 5 different lives, yet all lead to a single message. Enlightenment is real, and the path to recognizing it lies right before your eyes, within your own heart. Story 1. Angulimala, the murderer who found peace. Chapter 1. The darkness within the forest of Savatthi. In the days when the Buddha still walked the earth, there was a vast forest near the city of Savatthi, dense with ancient trees, their shadows so thick that sunlight rarely touched the ground. People called it the forest of blood, not because of the color of its soil, but because of the countless lives that had ended there, all by the hand of one man, Angulimala. His real name was long forgotten. Angulimala, meaning the garland of fingers, was the only name he had left, for around his neck hung a grisly chain, made from the severed fingers of his victims. Each finger was a mark of his crimes, a trophy of madness, and one more step toward the abyss of karma that he himself had dug. No one dared enter the Savatthi forest after sunset. Even the whisper of the wind through the branches sounded like the cries of the dead. From distant villages, children were warned, "Sleep now, or Angulimala will come for you." Merchants took the longer route around the forest, even if it meant days of extra travel, anything to avoid the piercing eyes of the beast in human form. No one knew how a brilliant young student could have turned into a monster. There were whispers that he once studied under a renowned teacher, intelligent, devoted, admired. But jealousy and deceit had poisoned his world. Someone, out of envy, had slandered him, turning his teacher against him. Cast out, betrayed, and broken, Angulimala left the monastery with a heart filled with bitterness and rage. From that day, he disappeared from the world of light. The forest became his home. At first, he killed to survive. Then he killed out of fear. Later, he killed for revenge. And finally, he killed simply because he no longer knew how to stop. In his delirium, he believed each life he took brought him closer to liberation, the final lie his twisted mind could cling to. Rumor spread that he had slain nearly 100 people, and that once he reached the number 100, his ritual would be complete, and he would become invincible. The people trembled in terror. Even soldiers refused to pursue him. His aging parents, burdened with shame and grief, were shunned by the villagers, punished for the sins of the son they still loved. And yet, in the midst of that fear and chaos, something unexpected happened. The Buddha heard of Angulimala. He did not fear. He did not condemn. When the monks begged him not to go near the forest, the Buddha simply smiled and said, "No one is born a murderer. There are only those who have lost their way, and they need someone to guide them home." That morning, as the mist still veiled the forest, the Buddha draped his saffron robe over his shoulder and quietly began walking toward the forest no one dared enter. His steps were steady, gentle, as if fear itself did not exist. Deep inside, Angulimala sat sharpening his blade against a rock. His eyes burned with madness. Hearing footsteps, he stood, gripping his knife. Another traveler, he thought. The 100th finger has arrived. But when the figure in a golden robe appeared through the trees, Angulimala froze. Never had he seen. Not fear, but confusion. Why was this man not afraid? Why had he come? And why, in that fleeting instant, did the murderer, who had silenced so many hearts, feel his own heart begin to beat faster? Not from anger, but from something he could not name? He shouted, his voice echoing through the trees. "Stop! Don't you know who I am?" But the Buddha kept walking, his pace unchanged. His footsteps were soft, yet they carried farther than the wind. In that forest of blood, a meeting was about to begin. A meeting between darkness and light, between the killer and the awakened. And that day, for the first time, Angulimala, the terror of the land, began to hear the sound of peace. Chapter 2. The Chase Between Light and Darkness. That morning, the forest of Savatthi was eerily silent. No birds sang, no leaves rustled. Even the wind seemed to have stopped, leaving only the damp chill clinging to the ancient trees. Deep within the woods, where the tangled roots looked like blackened arms, Angulimala was sharpening his knife. The steel blade gleamed under the pale sunlight. He had long lost count of how many people had died by his hand. Numbers no longer held meaning. Only the obsession remained, the 100th finger. He believed that when his necklace of severed fingers reached 100, his ritual would be complete. He didn't truly know why he believed it. He only knew that it was all he had left to cling to, like a drowning man clutching driftwood. Then came the rumor. A wandering monk was said to be passing through the forest, alone. The merchants who spread the tale had barely escaped with their lives the day before. They said the monk carried no weapon, only a begging bowl, and walked calmly as though fear itself could not touch him. Some thought he was mad. Others whispered he might be a holy man. But to Angulimala, it meant only one thing, his final victim. He sprang up, eyes gleaming with wild excitement. "That monk will be the 100th, he muttered, the corner of his mouth twisting into a cruel smile. Not long after, he saw a figure emerging along the narrow, leaf-strewn path, a thin man in a faded saffron robe, holding an alms bowl, moving with slow, deliberate steps. In the soft morning light, his robe seemed almost to shine. There was no fear, no haste, only a serene stillness that defied understanding. Angulimala crouched behind a tree, breath quick and heavy. He waited for the right moment, then lunged forward like a predator. But something strange happened. The monk did not. Trained by countless hunts. Yet no matter how hard he ran, the distance between him and the monk remained the same. He ran harder, lungs burning, sweat soaking his brow, but the figure ahead stayed. Just out of reach, neither near nor far, as if time itself was playing tricks on him. Frustration turned to rage. "Stop," he roared, his voice echoing through the forest. The monk kept walking. "Stop," I said. Angulimala screamed again, his voice hoarse with fury. Then, the monk turned slightly. His eyes were calm, still as a lake untouched by wind. His voice was gentle, yet it carried effortlessly through the air. "I have stopped, Angulimala. When will you stop?" The words struck him like a thunderbolt. He froze. The knife in his hand trembled. "What do you mean? You've stopped? What are you talking about?" The monk spoke softly, still composed. "I have stopped from violence, from hatred, from delusion. But you, though your legs run swiftly. Compassion. And within that compassion burned a quiet light, one that made him want to flee and yet could not look away. Something inside him shifted. The beast within growled in resistance. But a faint, fragile sense of peace began to flicker. When was the last time someone had spoken to him with such warmth? When was the last time he felt human? "Aren't you afraid of me?" he rasped. Hands that had taken so many lives, now trembling uncontrollably. He tried to grip his knife, but some unseen force seemed to hold him back. He stumbled backward, eyes glistening. "No, I can't. Stop. It's too late for me." The Buddha's gaze softened even more. No one has gone too far to turn back. It only takes one step toward truth. The forest fell completely silent. Then came the sound, sharp, heavy, final, of the knife hitting the ground. Angulimala collapsed to his knees, his breath ragged. Tears, real, human tears, streamed down his face. Sunlight through the canopy. He did not approach, nor did he walk away. He simply stood, as though giving the darkness in another man's heart time to dissolve. And there, in that sacred silence, Angulimala, the terror of Savatthi, finally began to understand what it truly meant to stop. Chapter 3. When light no longer needs to run from darkness. The morning sun filtered through the thick canopy, scattering pale beams across the forest path layered with fallen leaves. The air in the Savatthi forest was heavy, motionless, as if even nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable to unfold. And within that silence, a destined encounter was reaching its climax. Angulimala, the killer who wore a garland of severed fingers around his neck, saw the Buddha at last. He saw a saffron-robed figure walking calmly through the trees, bare feet touching the ground without a sound. There were no guards, no attendants, no trace of fear. The man walked as though every step was a note of serenity, as though peace itself had taken form. A surge of rage ignited in Angulimala's chest. "How dare he walk into my forest without fear?" he snarled. Clutching his knife, his eyes burning red, he charged forward like a wild beast unleashed, breath sharp, muscles tense, hatred blinding every thought. Leaves scattered beneath his feet. The forest roared with his footsteps. He was used to screams, to panic, to the sight of people begging for mercy before they died. But this time, the man ahead did not even turn his head. The Buddha continued walking, slowly, steadily, his robe gliding softly like flowing light. Angulimala ran faster, his heart hammering. Sweat streamed down his back, his breath ragged, yet the distance between them did not close. It was as if he was chasing the horizon itself. No matter how fiercely he sprinted, the calm figure ahead remained just beyond reach, neither near nor far. Frustration turned into fury. He roared, his voice shaking the forest. "Stop! Stop, I say!" The Buddha turned slightly, his expression serene, and said in a voice soft as wind, "I have stopped. Long ago, Angulimala. It is you who have not yet stopped." The words were simple, yet they struck like an arrow straight through his heart. Angulimala froze mid-stride. For a moment, everything inside him trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper, something he could not name. "What do you mean?" he gasped. His voice was hoarse, almost pleading. The Buddha's eyes met his. Calm, luminous, infinite. "I have stopped from hatred, from violence, from delusion. But you, though your legs run swiftly, your heart still runs after anger and desire. You have not yet stopped." The forest fell silent again. The only sound was Angulimala's heartbeat, wild, echoing, almost painful. Those words rang through him like a bell in the dark. He had always thought of himself as the hunter, the one who chased others. But now he saw the truth. He had been the one running all along. Running from betrayal. Running from guilt. Running from the shadow of his own mind. In a flash, memories surged. The betrayal of his teacher, the rage, the screams, the countless faces of those who had fallen beneath his blade. He looked at his hands, the same hands that had taken so many lives, now trembling violently. The knife slipped from his grasp and fell to the ground with a dull, heavy thud. Angulimala dropped to his knees, hands clutching his head. I've killed too many. How can I ever stop? How can I be saved?" The Buddha stepped closer, his movement slow, unhurried. His gaze remained gentle, boundless, steady, unjudging. "No one is born a killer," he said. "It is only the mind, clouded by darkness, that forgets its own light. But even in the deepest night, the smallest spark can still shine." A breeze passed through the trees. The leaves rustled softly, like a whisper of compassion. And in that sound, something inside Angulimala broke, not in despair, but in release. The hatred, the madness, the fear he had carried for years began to dissolve. Tears streamed down his face, raw, human, trembling like a child who had just found his way home. "Lord Buddha, I was wrong," he cried, voice shaking. The Buddha said nothing. He simply looked at him, eyes filled with infinite kindness. "You have stopped now," he said quietly. "And that is the beginning of freedom." The Savatthi forest seemed to glow with new light. The heavy gloom that had shrouded it for so long began to lift. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, scattering over the fallen knife. Its blade, once reflecting blood, now reflected light. In that forest once soaked with fear and death, a miracle of stillness had taken place. Not a battle, not divine magic, just a moment, a single sentence, that awakened a sleeping soul. For when light no longer runs from darkness, the darkness itself begins to fade. And there, where Angulimala knelt, a new man was born. Chapter 4, When the Sword Fell, a new man was born. In the misty stillness of the Savatthi forest, everything suddenly froze. No wind, no birdsong, only the sound of a man's heavy breathing, kneeling on the damp earth. Beside him lay a blood-stained blade, fallen from his trembling hands. Angulimala, the man who once brought terror to the land, now knelt as nothing more than a fragile, broken being. He bowed low. His shoulders quivered, and then, like a child unable to contain it any longer, he broke into sobs. The sound was raw, hoarse, and wrenching, the sound of a soul cracking open. He cried for all the lives he had taken, for the parents who could no longer look upon their son, for the youth that once shone bright but had turned to ash. For years he had only known how to kill, flee, and laugh madly in defiance of guilt. But now, those tears were something new, a spring flowing from a heart he thought had turned to stone. The Buddha approached, his steps light as if untouched by earth. He stopped beside Angulimala and gazed at him for a long while. There was no anger, no judgment, only stillness, vast and compassionate. That look alone made the murderer's heart slow its frantic beat. Then, the Buddha reached out and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. Such a simple gesture, yet it felt as though the entire universe had touched a shattered soul. In a calm, resonant voice, the Buddha said, "Violence never ends through violence. Only compassion can extinguish the fire." Angulimala lifted his tear-streaked face, caked with dirt and grief. His lips trembled as he whispered, "But I have killed so many. How could anyone forgive a man like me? How can I ever atone for what I've done?" The Buddha smiled, a soft, sunlit smile that broke through the storm. "There is no path to purity except through stopping. You cannot return to the past to erase your sins, but you can plant the seeds of a new present. Every mindful breath, every good act from this moment on, these are the seeds that will free you from darkness." Angulimala looked down at his hands, the same hands that had stolen countless lives. Now they trembled, not from fear, but from release. A great weight seemed to lift from his shoulders, as though invisible chains had fallen away. He bowed deeply and said, "Please, let me follow you. I no longer wish to kill. I wish to learn how to stop." The Buddha remained silent for a while, then nodded. "You have stopped. You have seen the path. From now on, use these hands to help, not to harm." The wind rose gently, stirring fallen leaves around them. Light filtered through the trees, shining upon the spot where they stood. The blade on the ground caught the sunlight, no longer reflecting blood, but the brightness of a new dawn. Beneath those forest trees, a murderer knelt, and a new man was born. From that day, Angulimala followed the Buddha back to the Jetavana monastery. Step by step, he learned to breathe again, to sit still, to eat and live without harm. Each night, he knelt in silent meditation, listening to the echoes within, the screams, the clashes, the cries. And within that stillness, he began to understand. No one else could forgive him except himself. When the people of Savatthi learned of his ordination, they were furious. Many came to the monastery shouting, hurling stones. He deserves death. A murderer cannot become a monk. Angulimala did not retaliate. He bowed his head, blood dripping from his brow, whispering verses of compassion. The Buddha, watching from afar, remained silent. When the crowd dispersed, he approached and asked, "Do you hate them, Angulimala?" Angulimala shook his head. "No, blessed one. I only see their fear, the same fear that once ruled me." The Buddha smiled gently. "Then truly, you have stopped." Years passed. Angulimala became a humble monk, quiet, kind, and serene. He rarely spoke, preferring to teach through his actions. When he went on alms rounds, he chose the farthest paths, where few dared to go. One day, he found a woman deep in the forest, crying in labor, alone and terrified. He knelt beside her, offering support, chanting verses of protection until the child was safely born. From that moment, he was no longer seen as the killer. People feared, but as a symbol of compassion born from the ashes of violence. In his later years, Angulimala sat under a tree, closing his eyes in quiet peace. He could hear the wind, the rustling leaves, and the distant laughter of children. In that moment, he knew he had truly been forgiven, not by others, but by his own awakened heart, the heart that had once dared to put down the sword. The same hands that had once spilled blood now rested gently in meditation. A soft smile curved his lips, calm, serene, and free. Somewhere in the Savatthi forest, a leaf fell, closing the story of the murderer who found peace. And in the wind, one could almost hear the echo of the Buddha's words. Violence never ends through violence. Only compassion can make one truly stop. Chapter 5. The Murderer Who Became the Bringer of Light. Many years after the fateful encounter in the forest of Savatthi, the name Angulimala, once enough to strike terror across the land, had faded into legend. But among the villagers near Jetavana, whispers still lingered. Every dawn, they said, a monk in saffron robes walked silently through the streets, barefoot, alms bowl in hand. He passed by each house, calm and steady, while the villagers muttered behind their doors. Some turned away, some hurled insults, others threw stones or clods of dirt. But the monk, who had once waded through rivers of blood, only lowered his head and received it all with the faintest, most peaceful smile. No anger, no resentment, only a quiet radiance in the eyes of a man who had once been consumed by darkness. Few knew that to earn the right to wear those robes, Angulimala had walked through a far harsher punishment than any prison could impose. After the Buddha accepted him as a disciple, he lived in deep seclusion for years, rarely stepping beyond the monastery. He meditated for hours, sometimes through the night, confronting the ghosts that haunted him, the screams, the faces, the eyes of those he had killed. There were nights when tears streamed down his face until dawn. Yet, through those tears, he began to understand the true meaning of repentance, not to escape the past, but to face it fully and to transform one's life into an act of atonement. The Buddha had once told him, "No sin is beyond redemption if the heart truly stops." And so, each morning, Angulimala put on his robe, took up his bowl, and walked into the village, not to seek forgiveness, not to be praised, but simply to walk mindfully, each step a prayer, each breath a silent offering to all beings. At first, the villagers were enraged. "That butcher dares to wear a monk's robe?" they shouted. But time, like a gentle breeze, wears down even the sharpest stones. One stormy morning, people saw the monk still standing in the rain, cradling his alms bowl under his robe, soaked to the bone, but smiling faintly. A small child, trembling, approached and placed a handful of cold rice in his bowl. The monk bowed and whispered, "May blessings come to you, little one." From then on, fewer stones were thrown. Some began leaving rice outside their doors. Eventually, the villagers grew accustomed to the image of the silent monk walking by each morning, as still as the wind, as patient as the earth. No one could have imagined that the man who once took hundreds of lives would one day become a living symbol of compassion. Once, a traveler asked him, "Do you truly feel no anger when people still curse you every day?" Angulimala smiled. When I was a murderer, they lived in fear of me. Now, they only cast words to release that fear. How could I hate them for that? That simple answer spread like a quiet flame, melting even the coldest hearts. Over the years, Angulimala devoted his life to helping others, the poor, the lost, the broken. He never preached. He simply embodied the truth he had discovered, that even in the darkest soul, compassion can be reborn. One dawn, when the sun had just begun to gild the forest edge, villagers found the monk seated beneath a tree, his posture straight, his lips curved in a serene smile. They thought he was meditating, but as they came closer, they realized Angulimala had passed away in perfect peace, like a flame quietly extinguished in still air. No one knew where his body was buried. But ever since that day, travelers say that the path he used to walk feels warmer, and the birds seem to sing more sweetly there. Parents told their children the story of the murderer who became a messenger of compassion, of the man who once made others weep in terror, but later made them weep with love. And through the centuries, amid tales of vengeance and karma, the name Angulimala endures, not as a mark of sin, but as a testament to the limitless power of transformation. Because when a person truly stops, even the deepest darkness can become light. Story 2. Sujata, the girl who offered the milk porridge and the moment of enlightenment. Chapter 1. The morning offering by the riverbank. In the small village of Uruvala, where the Ganges flowed gently past fields of golden barley, lived a young woman named Sujata. Every dawn, before the sun rose above the tamarind trees, she would wake, draw water from the river, and whisper a prayer to the spirits that guarded her home. Sujata was not from a wealthy family. Her hands were rough from years of work, and her life revolved around tending cows, grinding grains, and caring for her mother. Yet, in her heart, she nurtured a deep, innocent faith, the belief that kindness, no matter how small, could be seen by the heavens. That morning, Sujata carried a small clay pot filled with milk she had taken from her favorite cow, Nandini. She planned to make kheer, a simple porridge of milk and rice, as an offering to the forest deity she believed had blessed her with a good harvest. The villagers often laughed gently at her devotion. Sujata, do you really think the gods care about your little bowl of milk? Her neighbor teased. Sujata only smiled, her eyes soft and unwavering. Maybe they don't, she said, but a pure heart never goes unseen. As the first rays of light spilled across the meadows, Sujata began cooking. The scent of warm milk and rice drifted into the air, mingling with the sound of birds awakening. Her mother, old and frail, watched from the doorway. You've been preparing that offering for days, she said with a tired smile. May your prayer reach the heavens, my child. Sujata nodded, adding a few grains of sugar she had saved for weeks. If the gods are merciful, she whispered, they will bless this land and all who walk upon it. By noon, the kheer was ready, creamy, fragrant, shimmering with sunlight. Sujata placed it carefully into a golden bowl her father had once used in rituals. She wrapped herself in a saffron shawl and began her walk to the forest shrine by the river. Along the way, she passed through fields and winding paths, her bare feet brushing against wildflowers. The riverbank, she knelt down. The air there was strangely still, as if time itself was holding its breath. She bowed her head and placed the bowl of milk porridge before a small mound of earth, adorned with flowers and stones, her simple shrine to the deity. O guardian of this grove, she said softly, accept this humble gift. Grant peace to those who suffer, light to those who wander, and strength to those who seek. As she prayed, a gentle breeze stirred the leaves above. Sujata looked up and froze. In the distance, beneath another tree, sat a man unlike any she had ever seen. His frame was thin, his ribs visible through his skin, yet his face carried a calm so deep it seemed to silence the world around him. His eyes were closed, and his presence radiated both suffering and serenity. Sujata's heart pounded. Is that the spirit? She thought. For years, she had prayed for a sign, something to show that her offerings were not in vain. Slowly, she rose and approached him, bowl in hand. The man did not move, nor did he speak. But as she drew closer, a strange warmth filled her chest, a sense of compassion so pure it brought tears to her eyes. She placed the bowl gently before him and whispered, "If you are divine, accept this. If you are human, may it give you strength." The man opened his eyes, calm, deep, like an endless ocean, and looked at her. Their gazes met for a moment that seemed to suspend all sound, all thought. Then, with a faint nod, he accepted the offering. Sujata stepped back, her hands trembling. She didn't know who he was, only that something within her had shifted, as if her small act of kindness had brushed against eternity. The wind carried the fragrance of rice and milk through the trees, and the river shimmered in. Clearing, beneath a large Bodhi tree sat a monk, his robe worn thin, his body frail to the point that the cloth seemed to hang on bones. His head was shaven, his face gaunt, his eyes closed as he felt heavier. She had always offered food to the forest spirit, never to a human being. But something about this monk stirred an old echo in her heart. Her mother's voice. "Even a little," she said softly. "I have a little milk porridge. Would you accept it?" The monk opened his eyes. His gaze was steady, not begging, not commanding, just deeply aware. "Thank you, child," he said, his voice low but warm. "You have done a good thing." Sujata hesitated. I was going to offer it to the forest spirit," she admitted. "If you wish, I can prepare another." The monk looked into her eyes, as if reading the unspoken conflict there. Placing his hand gently on the bowl, he said, "Give me what your heart wishes to give. If it is offered with compassion, it is already a true offering." Sujata knelt beside him, setting the bowl before him. The monk ate slowly, one spoonful at a time. Each movement was calm, deliberate, as though every taste carried a silent prayer. A few villagers passed by, some shaking their heads, others staring in curiosity. But in that still morning light, there was only the girl and the monk, two souls sharing a bowl of milk. "You gave because your heart moved you to do so. That is rare." Sujata looked down, unsure what to say. "I only wanted to help," she murmured. It didn't feel like anything great. The monk smiled. A gentle sound, like leaves rustling. Great words often hold little truth. Small actions done in silence are what carry the real power. He gazed out toward the river. Sometimes a single act of kindness can help another find their path. Sujata frowned slightly. "But I'm only a village girl. How could I do something that important?" The monk's eyes gleamed softly. "You don't have to know." Hand, then back at him. The silence that followed felt sacred. The bowl, now empty, seemed to hold something far greater than food. It had become a vessel of giving, pure and unmeasured. Sujata felt her lips curve into a smile she couldn't suppress. The monk rose, draping his faded robe over his shoulder, and placed a hand gently on her head. "Go home, child," he said. "Keep that heart of yours. When you give, you receive in return, though not always in the way you expect." Sujata watched him walk away until his figure dissolved into the horizon. Something in her chest felt new, quiet, tender, alive. The act had been so small, yet it seemed to echo endlessly inside her. On her way back, a small boy ran up, holding a bundle of greens. "Sister Sujata, what did you give that monk?" he asked, eyes bright. She smiled and handed him one of the greens. "Just a little warmth," she said. "When you grow up, remember to share yours too." The sky. She didn't say a word, just felt the truth settling in her chest. Some actions never show their meaning right away, but one day, when you look back, you realize they were the first stones on a great path. As darkness slowly covered Uruvala, she whispered a small prayer, not to any god, but to all beings in need. No elaborate words, only the pure murmur of a humble heart. Above her, a single star gleamed a little brighter, as if the universe itself had answered her silent offering. Chapter 3. The gaze between the monk and the bowl of milk. Siddhartha sat there, way out of suffering. His voice was faint, his steps uncertain. People called him an extraordinary ascetic, determined to the edge of human endurance. Yet that very extremity had hollowed him out. As Sujata approached, the bowl of warm milk in her hands shimmered faintly, like a small moon in the morning light. Siddhartha looked at the bowl, then at her face. Her eyes were neither naive nor an act born of pure kindness. Sujata bowed slightly, her voice trembling. "Venerable sir, I offer you this milk. Please take it, if you are in need." Siddhartha replied slowly, his voice echoing as if from inside stone. I have been hungry for long. Thank you, child. He received the bowl with both hands, raising it before his chest as though holding something sacred. His trembling hands brought the spoon to his lips. The first sip was warm, sweet, and strangely soothing. Under the pale sunlight, tears slid down his face, not out of weakness, but from the realization that a lifetime of self-denial had reached its limit. He did not drink greedily. Each spoonful was like a quiet revelation, a reminder, a test. All the while, his eyes returned to Sujata, not to the milk, but to her small, calloused hands, her bright round eyes, the simple honesty in her gaze. It was not the look of a man seeking answers from scripture, but of one listening to the world through a single moment of pure presence. In the distance, a child's laughter echoed, and the leaves rustled softly. Siddhartha remembered the day he left the palace in search of truth. He recalled the endless hunger, the belief that by destroying the body, he could free the mind. The memories came like shards of broken mirrors, reflecting both effort and exhaustion. Then, suddenly, he set the bowl down and asked Sujata, his tone gentler now, "Do you know why you gave this to me?" Sujata looked startled, then bowed her head. "My mother taught me, sir. If someone is in need, I give. Nothing more." Siddhartha smiled faintly, a light, almost soundless laugh. "Not nothing more," he said. "Much more." Passers-by stopped to watch. An old man whispered, his voice trembling, "A single bowl of milk." Illusion that enlightenment required pain. He rose, walking away from the pond. The few steps felt like crossing a vast boundary. As his feet touched the earth, he felt it differently, no longer as, "I see what I could not before. This body is not an obstacle. It is a vessel." Sujata did not grasp the full weight of his words. She only saw that he smiled, his face gentler now. "I'm glad," she said simply. "My mother always said, what you give never truly leaves you." Siddhartha nodded, slowly. "I went too far into extremes, believing that by torturing the body, I could free the spirit. But this small bowl of milk, your act of giving, has shown me that wisdom cannot grow in a starving mind. There must be another way." Sujata smiled, still not understanding entirely, but sensing the quiet shift in him. "I only gave what I could," she said, "but I'm happy you accepted it." Siddhartha lifted his eyes to the sky, his mind unfolding like a garment being unwrapped. "There is a middle way," he said softly. "Not too hungry, not too full, not too harsh, not too loose. A way between all extremes." The words were delicate but decisive, like a needle stitching together the two halves of life. Sujata did not grasp the philosophy, but she saw the transformation in the man before her. His frail body seemed to carry new purpose, not in denial, but in balance. As he turned to leave, he placed a gentle hand on her head, a silent blessing, and said, "Live with that giving heart, child. You will see that some truths speak without words." Sujata held the harsh asceticism toward the path of balance. The sunlight danced across the water, reflecting her soft smile. Her mother's words came alive in her heart, that even the smallest act of goodness can shelter a great destiny. Chapter 4. Beneath the Bodhi tree, the mind still as a lake. Siddhartha walked toward the great Bodhi tree, where the earth was still warm from the afternoon sun. Opened, he sat down on the bare earth, making no effort to find comfort. The roots coiled around him, as if the tree itself embraced his weary body. The air was utterly still, save for the whisper of leaves and the faint murmur of a distant stream. Siddhartha placed his hands on his knees, eyes half closed, and breathed, slow, steady, complete. Gradually, the turmoil within began to dissolve. Tranquil space, not emptiness, but a clear foundation where true awareness could arise. From a short distance away, Sujata stood silently, watching him. On her face was a small, gentle smile, not of pride, but of witness. She had given him the little she had, and now saw something immense unfolding before her eyes, though she could not name it. A few villagers passed by, whispering among themselves, "That man looks different." Yet no one dared come close, as though sensing a sacred stillness settling over the place. Siddhartha sat long enough for the shadows to stretch and the the self-inflicted suffering, and then the simplicity of a peasant girl's gift. For the first time, he saw that wisdom did not bloom from destruction, but from care, from honoring the body that, as if afraid to break the silence. Siddhartha smiled, but offered no grand sermon. He simply pointed toward the nearby water, where ripples shimmered beneath the wind. "Look," he said, "when the wind stops, the lake becomes still. When the water is still, the sky is reflected clearly." The beggar watched the surface for a moment, bowed again, and walked on, carrying that quiet metaphor within him like a seed. Those who saw Siddhartha that day sensed a change. He no longer sought enlightenment through starvation or indulgence. He received what was necessary, neither more nor less. There was something balanced in his demeanor now, something like a middle way, though no one yet knew its name. Siddhartha opened his eyes, bright as water poured into a clear bowl, and gazed upward into the vast blue sky. Memories passed gently through him, his mother's touch, his father's stern eyes, his countless errors. But instead of regret, he felt gratitude. Each mistake, each sorrow had been a brick in the unseen path that had brought him here. A small boy from the village ran up, curious, and asked shyly, "Sir, are you full now?" Siddhartha smiled, deepened. Siddhartha remained in quiet vigil. Sometimes his eyes were closed, sometimes open, as though guarding something precious within. Sujata sat nearby, wordless, hands resting on her knees. "Dream." He turned to Sujata and said softly, "Thank you. Your bowl of milk did not only warm my body, it rekindled the light within me." Sujata smiled, replying simply, "I only did what I could." "Master." He nodded, his gaze distant yet serene. What is small in the eyes of the world can open vast spaces in the heart. Perhaps the path I've been searching for lies not in extremes, but here, in this middle ground. He paused, as if listening to the hum of earth and leaves. Then he added, almost like a promise, "Tomorrow, I will continue." Sujata did not understand the magnitude of his words. She only felt as though she had planted a seed in freshly watered soil. Her eyes glowed softly as she said, "I will be here, Master." Siddhartha smiled once more and walked away into the lengthening shadows, leaving behind a still patch of earth where breath and silence intertwined. Beneath the Bodhi tree, the ground seemed smoother, the air gentler, a quiet moment. Siddhartha sat beneath the Bodhi tree like one guarding a fragile secret. The moon had vanished, the wind was cold, and the scent of damp earth drifted through the still air, mixed with the ceaseless hum of insects, a kind of infinite music. He remained motionless, not from fatigue, but from an urgent need, to listen deeply to every breath, every thought, to discern which voice belonged to ignorance and which whispered of truth. All night, he examined every corner of his mind, the golden palace he had left behind, the years of hardship, the vow to end suffering. Each memory rose before him like a moving picture. He watched them without attachment, as one might watch clouds drift across the sky, neither grasping nor rejecting. Thoughts surged and faded, yet he stayed still. In that vast quiet, a clarity began to form, not blinding, not loud, but pure as a mountain spring. Before dawn, the first bird called. The horizon lightened, and a faint shimmer touched the leaves. Siddhartha opened his eyes. A sliver of sunlight pierced the canopy, spilling golden specks upon the ground. And in that moment, all the scattered fragments within him came together. Understanding arose, not through words, but through direct knowing that vibrated through every cell of his being. He saw clearly the chain of suffering and its cause, how ignorance wove itself into endless actions, how craving, anger, and delusion perpetuated the cycle. It was not a dry realization. It was a seeing so complete that he felt the roots of all existence laid bare before him. Past and future dissolved into one luminous present. And in that stillness, Siddhartha knew he had touched what he had long sought, enlightenment. A soft laugh escaped him, bright and gentle-like dew trembling on a leaf. It was not the laughter of triumph, but of recognition, that everything arises by conditions, that nothing has a fixed essence, and that freedom does not lie in escaping the world but in seeing it clearly. He looked toward the river, where light shimmered on the surface, as if the universe had opened a new mirror. Morning came. Sunlight spread across the narrow paths, gilding thatched roofs and bending over the backs of farmers. In a small hut in Uruvala, Sujata had risen early. She scooped water, humming softly, ready to tend her fields. The bowl of milk she had offered the day before was already forgotten. To her, it was just an ordinary act of kindness. She thought of her crops, of the torn shirt she would mend that night, of the children's laughter when they'd eaten their fill. She did not know that, just a few miles away, the man she had fed, frail and exhausted, had awakened to the ultimate truth. There were no signs, no ceremonies, no celestial trumpets, only a quiet morning, the crowing of roosters, and the smell of freshly turned earth. Sujata forgot the offering, forgot even his face. For her, giving was as natural as breathing, simple, pure, and without noise. Meanwhile, Siddhartha rose and walked away from the Bodhi tree. His frame was still lean, but his steps were different, steady, effortless, unbound. He reached the riverbank, sat, and looked into the flowing water. And softly, almost as a whisper to himself, he said, "I have seen. I have understood." The words were not declarations, but travelers passed him and felt a strange calm in his presence. Some stopped, bowing for guidance. He only smiled and said gently, live with awareness. No grand teachings, only a stillness that spoke. More than words. Back in Uruvala, Sujata worked beside the other villagers. An old woman asked, "Sujata, did you see that ascetic again?" She smiled faintly. "He seemed stronger, Grandma. I think he's gone on his way." The reply was light as breath. She had no idea that her small act of offering had played a part in awakening the one who would be called the awakened one. She only knew her heart felt warm, and that the morning sunlight across the fields looked softer somehow. In the days that followed, rumors drifted from mouth to mouth, of a monk who had awakened, of a voice unlike any other. Many would later ask, who helped him on his path? Names were guessed, stories invented. Few thought of the humble village girl, Sujata, who gave a bowl of milk, then returned to her field, tending the earth as always, unaware that she had helped set in motion a light that would touch the world. That evening, as Siddhartha watched the sunset, he remembered the warmth of that simple offering, the clarity in her eyes. He whispered silent gratitude, not for the nourishment, but for the moment of grace that had kept him alive to witness the truth. And somewhere across the fields, Sujata looked up at the violet sky, murmuring, "Maybe it will rain tomorrow," and smiled, thinking of her mother. She wrapped her scarf tighter and walked home, leaving behind a day that to her seemed ordinary, yet had changed the course of human history. And perhaps that is the quiet truth of all things. It is not only great deeds that shape destiny. Amrapali, the courtesan and the encounter that changed her life. Chapter 1. The Queen of Visali's Nights. Amrapali stepped into the grand courtyard like a flower blooming in the dark. Her garments were woven from the finest silks, her jewelry shimmered in the firelight, her hair was coiled elegantly, and her face painted just enough to soften the hunger in every gaze. The courtesan of power and desire. Men did not come to her merely for her beauty. Kings, generals, and nobles sought her company to hear her stories, to find a sliver of peace amid the chaos of silver onto the table. "Amrapali," he said, "Visali needs alliances. I offer my protection, my wealth, anything you desire. Let your fame echo across kingdoms." Amrapali smiled, setting her teacup down, her voice smooth as silk. "General, I'm grateful. But my heart is not a bargain to be bought with silver. I wish people would come to me for who they are, not for what they control." The general frowned, his pride pricked. "You're wasting your chance. Power is the cloak that shields the weak. How can you refuse it?" She tilted her head, eyes calm but distant. "Power can buy many things," she said softly, "but not freedom. I've traded smiles for safety, laughter for protection. But when the lights fade, I find only emptiness." Her words cut through the perfumed air. For a moment, the room froze, admiration giving way to uneasy silence. Amrapali was not just the city's muse. She was a woman living between two worlds, the dazzling light of fame and the quiet ache of loneliness. She was not only alluring, she was intelligent. Poets came to her chambers to discuss verses of longing and war. She analyzed their lines with passion and precision, surprising them with insight that went beyond charm. Once, a young monk visited, not to seduce or be seduced, but to ask her something few dared. What do you see when you look into your own mirror? I remember a girl I once was, before I learned how to smile for a price. The monk was silent. In that stillness, Amrapali revealed something few ever noticed. Beauty was not always freedom. If one day I walk away from all of this, who will understand? Who will see my solitude as something sacred, not shameful? The king said nothing. It was the first time someone had denied him not with defiance, but with truth. He left in silence, his pride wounded. Amrapali watched him go, a small smile on her lips, free, yet laced with sorrow. That night, she sat alone on her balcony, watching the city's lanterns flicker like fireflies. Laughter and music floated through the streets, the sounds of life she had mastered, yet never truly belonged to. Somewhere deep down, she longed for the scent of wet soil, for mornings without mirrors, for a life that did not need to perform. But the thought of leaving frightened her. To abandon it all was to walk away from the identity she had built, and from those who depended on her glitter to shine. Then, in the whisper of the evening breeze, she heard voices from the street. Amrapali, a holy man has come to Visali. Could a man with nothing, wearing only a simple robe, truly know the freedom I've been seeking? That night, sleep would not come. In her dreams, she saw a man in saffron robes walking through ashes, his gaze gentle and piercing all at once, not seeing her as an object, but as a soul that had forgotten its way home. She woke up, her heart beating fast. Maybe, she whispered into the dark, it's time to meet someone who sees beyond my beauty. At dawn, she dressed simply, no jewels, no elaborate makeup, just a soft shawl draped over her shoulders, as if to honor her truest self for the first time. She decided to walk into the streets, to see the monk with her own eyes. She didn't know what she was seeking, only that a quiet voice within had called, and for once, she chose to listen. As she walked through Visali, people stared, some in shock, some in admiration, some in confusion. But Amrapali kept her head high, her steps calm. Sunlight broke through the clouds, falling on her face like a blessing. For the first time, she was not walking to please anyone. She was walking towards something unseen, perhaps toward the light that beauty alone could never bring. Chapter 2. The Gaze Amid the Crowd. News of the Buddha's arrival in Visali spread like the scent of incense drifting through the streets. People whispered that he had come not to seek power or wealth, but to speak of something gentle and profound, something that could quiet the human heart. Amrapali heard the news while preparing for another lavish banquet. Wealthy patrons had booked their seats. Musicians were rehearsing the final notes. Yet, that piece of news struck her like a soft bell in the chest. Not mere curiosity, but a deeper calling she could not name. That afternoon, her hair tied back, a thin silk scarf draped over her shoulders. She wished to see without being seen, to listen without becoming the center of attention. But strangely, the more she tried to hide, the more the world seemed to notice her presence, as if fate itself was pulling her into this moment. The place where the Buddha was to speak was already packed, but Amrapali had long mastered the art of finding her way through crowds. She slipped into a narrow spot along the path, where she could see his face. When the Buddha appeared, everything suddenly fell silent, as though someone had lifted an invisible curtain. There were no drums, no grand announcements. Only a man in a saffron robe sitting down, his eyes calm, his face serene beyond anything she had ever witnessed. For the first time, Amrapali did not feel like the center of the universe. The Buddha's gaze moved slowly through the crowd, missing no one. It was not a gaze that judged or desired. It was like a veil of light that softened everything it touched. When his eyes met hers, her heart skipped a beat, not from fear, but from the uncanny sense of being seen completely, down to the layers she had hidden beneath beauty and fame. He began to speak, his voice slow and clear. The crowd grew still, as if every soul had found its rightful place in that silence. Amrapali closed her eyes at times, letting his words sink into places within her that had long been untouched. The Buddha spoke of suffering and its causes, of how greed, anger, and delusion chain the human mind. Yet, In his voice, those truths were not condemnation, they were liberation. An old man beside her whispered, "He looks at the world the way one looks at still water. When it's clear, you can see the bottom." Amrapali didn't respond, but the words resonated somewhere deep inside her. Sometimes the Buddha told simple stories, a falling leaf, a winding path, a child's laughter, and somehow, these images painted the kind of world she had forgotten existed beyond the shimmer of jewels and silk. Midway through the talk, a drunken soldier stumbled forward, shouting, "Why should our men drop their swords for your words?" Some gasped, others hissed for silence. But the Buddha did not flinch. He looked at the man with a calmness that seemed to absorb the noise around him and said gently, "You hold your sword, yet the sword cannot help you see yourself." The soldier fell silent, as if hearing his own inner voice for the first time. Watching that, Amrapali felt something stir, the strange realization that her beauty had once made others forget themselves, while this man's words helped people remember who they truly were. When the sermon ended, the Buddha rose and walked among the people. Some reached out for a blessing, some simply bowed and wept. Amrapali stood still, feeling like a fragile pane of glass among threads of light. When he came close, she felt every wall she had built tremble. Then, in the quiet between them, his voice, spoke softly. "Live not to be beautiful for others, but to be beautiful for yourself." The words fell into her heart like a seed into dry earth. She didn't respond right away. Echoes of her old life stirred. The clinking of coins, the hungry stares, the restless music of long nights. But beneath that noise, another sound emerged, faint but steady, the sound of her own soul, like water trickling through bamboo. Someone nearby whispered, "He speaks as if reading the heart." On her way home, Amrapali didn't take the main road. She wandered through the smaller streets, past woodcarvers, street vendors, and laughing children. She saw flower-streaked hands kneading dough and the simple rhythm of people's lives, and realized that life's beauty was not only found in the glow of lanterns and palaces. That night, she sat before her mirror, unadorned. The Buddha's gaze lingered in her mind, and his words echoed again. "Live not to be beautiful for others, but to be beautiful for yourself." She wondered, what did that truly mean? Was it to shed her masks? Or to find a place where her heart was no longer up for sale? There was a knock at the door. A servant bowed and said, "My lady, someone asks to see you." Amrapali smiled. But on awakening, outside, Visali was still alive with laughter and music, but within her, there was a silence so pure it frightened her. People might later think she resolved to renounce everything. When morning came, she opened her window to see the city bathed in gold. Life went on, noisy, imperfect, alive. She whispered to herself, "I may not change the world overnight, but I can change how I meet each dawn." And perhaps, one day, she would no longer need the light of torches, for she had begun to sense another kind of radiance, the one that comes from within. Chapter 3, The Meal Amid the Whispers. Amrapali returned to her grand residence with a whirlwind of thoughts. The words of the wandering monk still echoed in her mind, like a melody that had only been heard once, yet lingered deeply. Live not to be beautiful for others' eyes, but to be beautiful for your own soul. That sentence would not leave her. Something within her stirred, urging her to do something new. Buddha and his monastic disciples to dine at her home. When the rumor spread, it was like a spark landing in dry grass. All of Visali was soon buzzing. Some scoffed, "She seeks fame again." Others frowned. How dare she invite monks into such a house? Inside her mansion, her attendants whispered anxiously. One of them dared to speak. "My lady, that ascetic is but a poor wanderer. And the Sangha, they are pure men. People will never accept it if they eat here." Another added nervously, "You'll lose your reputation. Please, don't do this." But Amrapali only listened quietly. Vegetables, ripe jackfruit, a bowl of mung bean porridge. She wanted to offer something from her own hands, humble yet sincere. When her invitation was delivered to the Buddha, the whole city buzzed. Again, a courtesan inviting the monks. What audacity! Some even gathered to protest, calling it impure and a disgrace to the holy path. On the appointed day, Amrapali dressed simply, no jewels, no perfume, and went out to receive the Buddha and his disciples herself. As the monastic procession entered, many townspeople gathered outside, whispering harshly. One nobleman stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "How dare you invite these venerable men into this house of shame?" His voice thundered through the courtyard. Amrapali did not retreat. Her voice was calm, but carried weight. "And who are you to judge what lies in another's heart? I offer this meal not to flaunt myself, but because I wish to share what little I have, with sincerity." A man from the crowd shouted, "You are a harlot. You've defiled many. How can the holy ones dine under your roof?" The words cracked like a whip. The crowd grew tense. Disapproval filled the air. Then the Buddha, serene and unmoved, rose from his seat. His eyes were calm, his steps measured. He looked at the people, then at Amrapali, and said gently, "Let me answer with action rather than words." Turning toward the crowd, his voice was firm but soft, like a river smoothing stone. "You call one impure because you see only her body. But if a bowl of rice is offered with a pure heart, it can warm even the coldest soul." His words seemed to cool the air itself. The angry murmurs quieted. Some faces turned thoughtful, others softened in embarrassment. Amrapali, though she had prepared herself for ridicule, found her heart strangely calm. Even the servants stood still, and a small boy peeked shyly from behind his mother's skirt, watching. She carried the tray herself, offering food to each monk, one by one. Her hands did not tremble, her eyes did not lower. "Please," she whispered gently, "accept this." When the Buddha received her bowl, the murmurs rose again. Some whispered that he should not eat, lest he be defiled. But the Buddha raised the bowl, bowed his head in gratitude, and ate slowly, each mouthful mindful, each gesture a silent teaching. Then he placed the bowl down and said, "This meal nourishes not only the body, but also the giver. Look deeply and see from what heart it is given." The crowd fell silent. People began to look at. She bowed slightly, her hands over her heart. The same nobleman who had shouted earlier now lowered his gaze. He looked at the Buddha's bowl, then at Amrapali, stripped of glamour, standing with bare humility. His lips tightened, and he stepped back in quiet shame. The meal continued in an unfamiliar stillness. Only the sounds of eating and soft breathing remained. "Luxury," she answered without embellishment, without defense. When the meal ended, the Buddha rose and said gently, "A bowl of rice given with sincerity defile no one, just as beauty, when rooted in kindness, is not a sin. Let deeds speak louder than judgment." He spoke no more, yet the words lingered like fragrance after rain. As the monks departed, one young servant approached, quiet courtyard, and said softly, "I only wish to show them that even a heart once lost can turn toward the light." Chapter 4. Tears and Refuge. When the heart turns toward the light. The grand hall of Amrapali's mansion was wrapped in silence after the meal ended. The candles had burned low, the scent of oil mixed with the lingering warmth of food. No one spoke. They sat quietly, open. She looked around. Those faces, kings, nobles, merchants, were all too familiar. Men who had once come to her seeking pleasure, to fill their emptiness with her beauty. They came, they took, and they left, and she stayed behind, night after night, alone. But tonight, as she watched them seated before her, she suddenly saw through it all, the fragility, the weariness, the futility of everything she had built. A sadness rose within her, not of pride lost, but of a soul long tired of pretending to shine. Her eyes blurred. She clutched her chest, her breath breaking into sobs. Where the monks sat in calm stillness, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Men ready to stop her, to remind her of her place, to keep her from disgracing her status. But what they expected never came. She reached up and unpinned the jeweled ornament from her hair. It fell, clinking softly onto the floor. Then another, and another, bracelets, earrings, chains. Each sound echoed like the shedding of an old skin. Never before had anyone seen her, the radiant Amrapali, stand so stripped of power, so raw, so human. She knelt down before the monk, her hands trembling. "Venerable sir," she said, her voice breaking, "I have walked the wrong path for too long. I wish to take refuge in the Triple Gem. Please accept me as your disciple." The room froze. Someone whispered, of guilt, but the awakening of a long-buried yearning for peace. The Buddha looked at her, not with judgment, not with pity, but with quiet compassion. He leaned forward slightly, his hands gently. Spoken against her now looked away, his eyes moist. A maid wept quietly. A few young men bowed their heads, unsure why they suddenly felt ashamed. The Buddha stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, not to bless her, but to steady her. His eyes were calm, and within them there was no trace of the world's divisions. He said softly, each word clear as moonlight, "No one is lowly when their heart turns toward goodness." The words fell like rain on scorched earth. They did not condemn her past, they opened a door. Amrapali felt something inside her shift, expand, as if the air itself had changed. She bowed deeply, clutching the hem of his robe, her tears falling freely. "I take refuge," she whispered. A monk stepped forward to perform the brief ritual. It was simple, unadorned, just a vow, a clasp of hands, an exchange of glances. When it was done, Amrapali stood up, not as a sinner redeemed, but as a woman reborn into stillness. The gold and silk around her sentence lingered, unsettling and beautiful. Amrapali sat on the steps, her hands resting in her lap. Her gaze lifted toward the sky. She thought of her childhood, of dreams sold for survival, of faces that had come and gone. Then, of the path that now opened before her, a life where beauty would no longer bind her, but guide her toward compassion. A small oil lamp beside her flickered, casting a soft glow across her face. She closed her eyes, smiled, and whispered to herself, "I will live differently from now on." Chapter 5. White Mango Blossoms in Visali. Amrapali left her mansion at dawn, when the last candles still flickered on the shelves and the faint echoes of music clung to the floorboards like a distant memory. The housekeeper stood at the doorway. "Arrest the past itself." Amrapali smiled gently, placed a hand on the woman's shoulder once, then stepped away as one who gathers herself from the ashes. "Take care of the house. I will take care of my heart," she said. She did not make a grand exit. There was no proclamation, no spectacle, only a quiet departure with a light bundle, a few worn robes, resolve, and a fragile hope that her heart dawned. For the first time in many years, she did not have to practice the crafted smile that once won favor. She greeted the day with a single steady breath. The early days were not easy. Different. The servant bowed, speechless. She learned to sit in meditation, to care for her body, to give without expectation. At dawn she swept the courtyard with both hands, letting her mind quiet. Like still water. Once a woman from Visali arrived carrying her sick child, tears streaking her face. Amrapali did not ask about the woman's past. She simply took her hand and enlisted the help of gift. Amrapali answered simply, "I do what I can." Word of her deeds spread along the paths of Visali. The stories were not praises nor condemnations, just plain accounts. Amrapali has become a helper to the poor. The mango trees at the hermitage bloom whiter than ever. Some scoffed, "That's just nature." But the older folk nodded, hands folded. When someone chooses the path of good, nature seems to answer. Many remembered the ordination, how the woman who once shone in lantern light knelt and cried. They told how she shed jewels, how she rose with a calm that came from repentance and resolve. Critics still questioned whether the past could be cleansed. Yet those who had been helped by her, the children fed by her hands, would only smile quietly. Time passed. Amrapali became a familiar figure along the hermitage lane. People saw her sowing seeds in the garden, sitting in silent vigil, sharing meals with the monastics. On festival days the monks invited, eyes warm as embers. "Regret helps me remember, so I do not return. Now I feel light, light as the mango blossoms." In Visali, a curious tale took root. Every mango season, the trees around the hermitage bloomed pale as snow, flowers whiter, fruits sweeter, fragrance stronger. People said it was a sign that her heart had been purified. Some mocked it as superstition. Older listeners would smile and say quietly, "There are things in nature that answer when a person chooses goodness." One afternoon, a royal messenger arrived with an invitation. The king asked Amrapali to return to court for a ceremony, hoping to reclaim her renown. The messenger found her at the hermitage gate, carrying a small bundle of bananas to distribute. He bowed awkwardly. "Mistress, the king requests your presence." Amrapali glanced at the note and shook her head gently. "I have left the clamor behind. If the king needs me, I will come in gratitude, but not as a spectacle," she said. The messenger retreated, thoughtful. Stories about her life shifted from scandal to gentle vignettes. She would buy a small bag of rice and secretly give portions to beggars. She would sit late by the kitchen fire, listening to elders tell of their youth. When a child wailed, she always had a calming smile. People spoke of her not with salacious curiosity, but with warmth and recognition. Once, when the air turned crisp, a child asked her, "Sister Amrapali, do you ever feel sad about those nights long ago?" She regarded the child with kind eyes. "I am sad at times, but sadness helps me." "Remember," she replied. "Remembering keeps me from returning. I choose this path so that good seeds may sprout." The child nodded, as if grasping a simple truth. A monk asked her one day amid the orchard, "What comes to your mind when the mango trees bloom white?" Amrapali closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and answered, "I think life is like seasons, times of fading and times of blossoming." In quiet afternoons, villagers would find her under the mango tree with a small book, watching white petals fall like pale snow. Young seekers sat at her feet, asking about her past and the way she lived. She would smile and say, "It is not about who you were. It is about what you do now." Visali still speaks of her, not as a faded celebrity, but as a living reminder. Beauty and desire are not sins if the heart turns toward the light. Each year when the mango trees bloom white, people pause and bow their heads, an unspoken gratitude for a soul that once passed through their lives. And there are lessons that people spend entire lifetime